Maria had always been different from other women in her world. She lived in a huge house filled with everything a person could dream of: chandeliers that sparkled like stars, marble floors that shone brighter than the sun, and a closet full of expensive clothes she rarely touched. Yet, despite all this wealth, she preferred the simplest things in life. While others chased luxury, Maria found peace in small moments, watering her plants early in the morning, baking fresh bread for her neighbors, and spending quiet evenings reading by the window. Her husband, David Thompson, was one of the most successful businessmen in the country. People knew him as a billionaire, the owner of several companies, the man who drove the rarest cars, and someone whose name often appeared in business magazines. But Maria never saw him that way. To her, David was the same humble man who once helped her fix a flat tire on a rainy road years ago. The man who smiled kindly, shared his umbrella, and talked to her as if she was the most important person in the world. That was the moment their story had begun. Even after marriage, Maria refused to live like the wives of other rich men. She didn't care for diamonds or designer handbags. Instead, she liked wearing plain cotton dresses and simple shoes. She always said, "Comfort is more beautiful than luxury." The maids often offered to do everything for her: cooking, cleaning, shopping. But Maria liked doing things on her own. She believed that work kept her grounded, reminded her of who she truly was before wealth entered her life. David loved this about her. He often told his friends, "Maria is my greatest fortune." While he spent his days managing meetings, investments, and projects, she filled their home with peace and love. Every evening when he returned home, tired from the world's noise, Maria would greet him with a warm smile and a simple meal. They would sit on the balcony, drink tea, and talk about their day, not about money or business, but about dreams, kindness, and life. However, not everyone understood Maria's simplicity. In high society gatherings, people whispered behind her back, "Why does she dress like that? She doesn't even wear jewelry. She doesn't look like a billionaire's wife." Maria heard those comments, but never let them hurt her. She knew that real respect didn't come from clothes or brands. It came from the heart. She often visited local orphanages, donating food and clothes, but never mentioned her name. The children loved her, calling her Aunt Maria, not knowing she lived in a mansion. She felt happiest when she was helping others quietly, without cameras or fame. One Sunday morning, Maria woke up early, as usual. David was still asleep, and the house was silent. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, looking at the garden. A thought suddenly came to her mind. David's birthday was coming soon. Every year, he showered her with gifts, from handmade jewelry to surprise vacations. But Maria had never bought him something truly grand. She wanted to do something different this time, something that would make him smile. The way he made her smile every day. She remembered how much David loved cars. He often spent hours talking about engines, models, and designs. So, she thought, why not surprise him with a new car? Not just any car, something truly special, something worthy of him. She had no idea about cars, but she wanted to find out. The thought excited her. For once, she wanted to do something extravagant for the man who never let her feel like she lacked anything. Maria quickly finished her tea and dressed up. She didn't wear makeup or fancy clothes, just her favorite beige dress and a small purse. She decided to visit one of the most famous luxury car dealerships in the city, a place she had only seen in magazines. As she looked in the mirror before leaving, she smiled softly. "I hope he loves this surprise," she whispered, outside. The city was busy, full of noise and rush, but Maria walked calmly to her car, a small, old vehicle she preferred over the luxurious ones parked in her garage. She believed it was safer and easier to drive. As she drove through the streets, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. She had never gone to such a fancy place alone. But her heart was full of love and purpose. She didn't realize that this simple decision to visit the car dealership would soon turn into one of the most unforgettable moments of her life. In her mind, she only wanted to do something kind for her husband. She had no idea that her plain dress, her soft voice, and her humble manners would make people there judge her unfairly. She didn't know that a storm of humiliation and pride was waiting for her behind those shining glass doors. For Maria, this was just a normal day filled with love and thoughtfulness. She was the same simple woman with a pure heart, unaware that by the end of this journey, the whole world would know her story. As she approached the dealership, the big sign gleamed in gold letters. Elite Motors, luxury cars for the elite. She parked her car quietly and took a deep breath. Her heart was full of good intentions, her mind dreaming of the smile on David's face when she would surprise him. Little did she know, the next few hours would test her patience, her dignity, and her belief in kindness like never before. Asterisk, the morning sun shone brightly as Maria drove through the busy city streets, her little silver car weaving between shiny luxury vehicles. She hummed softly to herself, feeling both nervous and excited. Today was special. Today she was going to buy a gift for her husband, David. Not just any gift, but something grand, something he truly loved, a car. After an hour of driving, she reached Royal Elite Motors, one of the city's most luxurious car dealerships. The building looked like a glass palace. The walls sparkled under the sunlight and through the windows. She could see rows of shining cars, BMWs, Ferraris, and the most elegant of them all, a Rolls Royce. For a moment, she stood still in the parking lot, gazing at the building in awe. She wasn't dressed like most customers who visited places like this. Maria wore a simple beige dress, her hair tied in a loose bun. She carried a small cloth purse, no designer logo, no gold jewelry. To her, comfort mattered more than fashion. She looked at her reflection in the car window and smiled softly. "It doesn't matter how I look," she whispered to herself. "I'm here for love, not for show." With gentle steps, she walked inside. The sound of her heels echoed against the shiny marble floor. The air smelled of perfume and polished leather. Around her, salespeople in suits were attending two well-dressed customers, men in expensive watches and women in glittering dresses. Everyone seemed busy talking about horsepower, features, and luxury interiors. Maria approached the front desk with a polite smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "I'd like to see your Rolls Royce collection, please." The young receptionist looked up from her computer, gave Maria a quick glance from head to toe, and frowned slightly. "Ma'am, are you sure?" she asked, her voice dripping with doubt. "Those cars are quite expensive." Maria nodded kindly. "Yes, I'm sure. I'd like to take a look." The receptionist hesitated, then called a salesman nearby. Mark, can you help?" "This customer," she said reluctantly, her tone suggesting she didn't expect anything serious from this visit. Mark, a tall man in a sharp blue suit, walked over with a forced smile. "Hello, ma'am," he greeted. "You're interested in the Rolls Royce, you said?" "Yes," Maria replied, still smiling. "My husband loves cars, and I'd like to surprise him with one." Mark's fake smile widened. "Oh, how lovely," he said. But his eyes were already judging her. He noticed her simple dress, the worn-out purse, and the small car keys in her hand. In his mind, she was just another dreamer, someone who had wandered in by mistake. "Of course," he continued sarcastically, "but maybe we should start with something more affordable. We have some nice used cars over there." He pointed toward a section of older vehicles near the corner. Maria looked in that direction, then turned back to him politely. "No, thank you. I'd like to see the Rolls Royce, please. It's a special gift." Mark sighed impatiently. "Ma'am, those cars start from $500,000. They're not really for everyone." His tone grew sharper, his smile colder. Maria's face remained calm, though her heart sank a little. "That's all right," she said softly. "I just want to see it. I'll decide after that." The salesman chuckled under his breath and gestured to his colleague nearby. "Hey, Tom, she wants to buy a Rolls Royce," he whispered mockingly. Tom laughed quietly, shaking his head. They didn't think Maria could hear them, but she did. The words pierced her heart, but she stayed silent. Her mother had once told her, when people are rude, let your dignity speak louder than their insults. So, she stood still, holding her purse tightly, keeping her gentle smile alive, even when it hurt. Mark decided to end the waste of time. "Ma'am," he said stiffly, "we don't allow casual visitors to touch or sit inside our Rolls Royce models without an appointment. These vehicles are exclusive." "I understand," Maria said. "Can I at least see one from a distance?" He sighed dramatically. "Fine, follow me." He led her toward the back of the showroom, where a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom sat like a king among cars. Its surface shone like liquid metal, reflecting every light in the room. Maria's eyes widened. It was even more beautiful than she imagined. She took a step forward, whispering to herself, "David would love this." Finally, after several minutes of being ignored, the receptionist walked over and said politely but firmly, "Ma'am, if you're not planning to make a purchase today, please allow space for real customers." Maria blinked, her eyes glistening. "I just wanted to see the car," she whispered. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said coldly. "We're very busy. Please come back another time with an appointment." The meaning was clear. She wasn't welcome there. Feeling a lump in her throat, Maria nodded quietly. "Thank you for your time," she said, forcing a smile. Then she turned and walked out slowly, her heart heavy, but her pride intact. Outside, the sunlight felt different, harsher, almost painful. She got into her small car and gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to hold back tears. She wasn't upset because they didn't show her the car. She was hurt because they didn't see her humanity as she drove away. One thought kept echoing in her mind. Why do people think money defines worth? She didn't know it yet. But tomorrow the same dealership would witness a scene they would never forget, a moment that would change their idea of respect forever. Asterisk. When Maria returned home that evening, her heart still felt heavy. She didn't tell David anything. She just smiled faintly and said she was tired. Inside, though, her mind replayed every word, every laugh, every look from the people at the dealership. She had gone there with nothing but good intentions to buy something special for the man she loved. But instead, she came back feeling invisible. That night, she sat on the balcony, staring at the city lights. The stars above looked peaceful, but inside her chest was a storm. Maybe they were just doing their job, she whispered to herself, trying to find an excuse for their cruelty. But deep down, she knew the truth. They had judged her simply because she looked too simple to belong. The next morning, Maria woke up early. Despite the sadness in her heart, she wasn't ready to give up. She believed that kindness could open doors arrogance could never touch. So, she decided to visit the dealership one more time, this time. Not for herself, but to prove that respect should be given to everyone. No matter who they are. She put on the same beige dress, tied her hair neatly, and drove again to Royal Elite Motors. The same tall glass building stood before her, sparkling under the sun like a mirror reflecting pride. She took a deep breath and walked in with her usual gentle smile. Inside, the same receptionist saw her and frowned slightly. "You again," she muttered under her breath. Maria nodded politely. "Yes, I came back to see the Rolls Royce I asked about yesterday." The receptionist sighed and pressed a button on her headset. "Mark, that woman from yesterday's back," she said quietly. A moment later, Mark appeared, his expression full of irritation. He forced a thin smile. "Oh, "You're back," he said sarcastically. "Still thinking about the Rolls Royce, ma'am?" Maria nodded again. "Yes, I really liked it. I'd like to ask a few questions about its features." Mark crossed his arms. "Ma'am, I told you yesterday, those cars are not for casual viewing. They are for clients who can afford them." "I understand," she replied softly, "but I just want to know more about it. I might buy it." He chuckled cruelly. "You might buy it. Do you have any idea what that car costs?" He gestured toward the showroom floor, his voice rising slightly so nearby staff could hear. $500,000. You can't just walk in from the street and ask to test a Rolls Royce. A few other employees turned to look. One of them whispered something and laughed. Maria could feel their eyes on her like tiny knives. Her cheeks burned, but she stayed calm. "I didn't ask for a test drive," she said quietly. "I only asked about it," but Mark was already shaking his head. "Look, ma'am, I have real customers to attend to. If you're serious, you can bring your husband or whoever handles your finances. Otherwise, please don't waste our time." The word waste stung her like a slap. Her lips trembled slightly, but she didn't respond. Mark continued, his tone now openly mocking. "This isn't a charity showroom. Maybe you'd like to try the used car lot down the street. They might have something in your range." The laughter around her grew louder. The receptionist tried to hide her smirk. One of the security guards near the entrance looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Maria's heart sank. Yet, she didn't cry. Instead, she looked straight into Mark's eyes and said softly, "You should never judge people by how they look." Her voice was calm, but carried a quiet strength that silenced the room for a brief moment. Then Mark rolled his eyes. "Ma'am, please leave before we have to call security." Oh, that was the final blow. The humiliation was complete. She stood there for a second, her eyes glistening under the bright showroom lights. Everyone was staring, some with amusement, others with pity. She straightened her shoulders and said in a steady voice, "I came here with respect, and I'll leave with respect." With that, she turned and walked away slowly, each step heavier than the last. The automatic glass doors opened for her, but it felt like they were closing behind her heart. Outside, she paused near her small car. Through the showroom glass, she could still see them laughing, Mark boasting to his coworkers, pretending to wipe imaginary tears of laughter. It broke her heart, not because they insulted her, but because she realized how easily people forget their humanity. She sat in her car for a few minutes, staring at her hands on the steering wheel. "Why do people treat others this way?" she whispered. "All I wanted was to do something good." Tears rolled down her cheeks silently. She wiped them away quickly and drove off. On her way home, the streets blurred around her. Everything seemed quieter, lonelier. She felt small, not because of who she was, but because of how cruelly the world had treated her kindness. When she reached home, David was in the garden, trimming some plants. He turned and smiled warmly. "There you are," he said. "Did you go out again?" Maria tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "Yes, I went to that car place again." He looked at her closely, and she hesitated. Her throat tightened. "They laughed at me," she finally whispered. "They told me I didn't belong there." David's smile faded instantly. He walked closer, gently cupping her face in his hands. "They what?" She nodded slowly, tears escaping her eyes. "They asked me to leave. Like I was nothing." David's eyes darkened with quiet anger, but his voice stayed calm. "You are everything, Maria," he said softly. "And tomorrow, they'll understand exactly who they mistreated." Maria looked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He kissed her forehead gently. "You'll see," he said. "Tomorrow, you won't need to say a word." And as the sun began to set behind them, Maria didn't know that the very next day would become the most unforgettable day in the dealership's history. A day that would teach everyone there a lesson about respect, humility, and real class. Maria woke up the next morning feeling unusually quiet. The sun was peeking through the white curtains, painting golden lines on the walls, but she didn't feel its warmth. Her mind was still heavy from yesterday's humiliation. The words of the salesman, "People like you don't belong here," echoed inside her head like a broken record. David was already awake, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in his hand. When Maria opened her eyes, he smiled gently. "Good morning, love," he said softly. "How are you feeling today?" She tried to smile, but it barely reached her eyes. "I'm fine," she lied. David watched her for a moment, reading the pain behind her calm expression. He placed his cup on the table and walked toward her. "You're not fine, Maria," he said quietly. "You didn't deserve what they did to you." She sighed and looked down. "It doesn't matter, David. Some people just don't understand kindness. They only see money and clothes." David nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "But sometimes lessons must be taught. Not with anger, but with truth." Maria looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He smiled, that calm, mysterious smile she had always loved. "Get dressed," he said. "We're going to give your friends at the dealership something to remember." She blinked. "David, no, I don't want trouble." "Please don't embarrass them," he chuckled softly. "Embarrass them? No, my dear. I just want them to see who you truly are." Maria hesitated for a moment, but knew when David made up his mind. He always had a reason. She trusted him, she always did. After breakfast, David made a few phone calls while Maria watered her plants. His tone was calm but sharp, the kind of voice he used when handling business deals. She didn't know what he was planning, but she could sense that something big was about to happen. Later that afternoon, a large black truck pulled into their driveway. It carried something that gleamed beneath a silver cover. The driver, dressed in a formal uniform, stepped out and handed David a small folder. He nodded in satisfaction. Maria walked closer, curious. "What is this?" she asked. David smiled. "A small message," he said. Then he gently lifted the cover. Underneath stood a brand new Rolls Royce Phantom, its deep midnight blue paint shining like liquid glass. The car looked majestic, silent, elegant, and powerful, just like David himself. Maria gasped. "David, when did you?" He chuckled softly. "I ordered it last month, but it arrived just in time." He opened the door and looked at her. "Would you like to take a drive?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. "But David, I don't understand." "Why now?" He smiled again, his eyes filled with affection. "Because, my love, sometimes silence isn't enough. Some people only learn respect when they see what humility really hides." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a neatly folded note. "You'll give this to them," he said gently. Maria looked at the paper, still unsure what was happening. "David, what are you going to do?" He smiled softly. "Nothing dramatic," he said. "Just a reminder for those who forgot their manners." Meanwhile, at Royal Elite Motors, the staff were enjoying a slow day. The showroom buzzed quietly with music and polite conversations. Mark, the same salesman who had insulted Maria, was laughing with a coworker. "Can you believe that woman from yesterday?" he said. "Wanted to buy a Rolls Royce. I swear, some people dream too big." The receptionist giggled. "I almost felt bad for her," she said. But really, she shouldn't have walked in looking like that. Their laughter filled the room until the sound of an engine silenced everything. Outside, a Rolls Royce Phantom rolled to a graceful stop at the dealership's front door. The car gleamed like a mirror, its silver emblem catching the light as it purred softly. Mark straightened his suit immediately. "Oh, "A real customer," he said, adjusting his tie. The receptionist quickly stood up, smiling wide. "Finally, someone important." The driver stepped out tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored black uniform. He opened the back door with precision. Everyone's eyes turned toward the passenger seat. A familiar figure stepped out. Maria, the same simple woman they had laughed at. But this time, she looked different. Not because of her clothes, but because of her calm, confident aura. She held her small purse and the envelope David had given her. The entire showroom fell silent. Mark blinked in disbelief. "Wait. Her," he whispered to his colleague. Maria walked up to the receptionist, her steps quiet but strong. "Good afternoon," she said gently. "I have a delivery for your manager." The receptionist stammered. "Oh, of course. Right away, ma'am." Moments later, the manager appeared, a tall man with a forced smile. "Good afternoon. How may we help you?" Maria handed him the envelope. "This is for you," she said simply. The manager opened it. Inside was a short note written in elegant handwriting. "This Rolls Royce is for Mrs. Maria Thompson, the woman you expelled yesterday. A gift from her husband, David Thompson." The color drained from the manager's face. He looked up, speechless. David Thompson. As in the owner of Thompson Group. Maria smiled politely. "Yes," she said. "That's my husband." The staff froze. Mark's jaw dropped, his earlier arrogance vanishing like smoke. Before anyone could speak, another luxury car arrived, a black Bentley. David stepped out, tall and composed, his presence commanding instant respect. He looked around the silent showroom, his eyes calm but sharp. "I believe my wife was treated poorly here yesterday," he said in a firm voice. "I don't need an apology. I just want you all to remember, respect is free. You don't have to sell it." No one spoke. The entire staff stood frozen, guilt written all over their faces. Maria turned to David and smiled softly. "I think they understand now." He nodded. "Yes," he said. Lesson delivered. Then, with quiet grace, they both got back into the Rolls Royce and drove away, leaving behind stunned faces, whispering staff, and a lesson that would echo through that dealership for years to come. The next morning dawned calm and golden. The city was just beginning to wake, but at Royal Elite Motors, something extraordinary was about to happen, something that none of the employees there would ever forget. Inside the showroom, everything looked the same as usual. The shiny marble floors, the sparkling lights reflecting off luxury cars, and the soft instrumental music playing in the background. Yet the mood among the staff was restless. There was a quiet buzz, as if the air itself carried a secret. Mark, the salesman who had once laughed at Maria, was bragging to a coworker about closing a small deal the day before. "You see," he said proudly, "I can tell who's a real buyer just by looking at them. You have to have an eye for class." The receptionist laughed half-heartedly. But before Mark could continue his story, the ground outside began to hum with the low, powerful sound of an approaching engine. It wasn't loud, it was smooth, deep, commanding. Everyone turned their heads toward the glass doors. Outside, midnight blue Rolls Royce Phantom glided into the parking lot. Its body shimmered like dark water under the sunlight. The silver Spirit of Ecstasy emblem on its hood caught the light, glowing like a jewel. The car didn't just arrive, it announced itself without words. The staff rushed to the entrance, straightening their jackets and fixing their hair. Mark grinned confidently. "Now that's a customer," he said. Unaware of the irony in his words, the car came to a slow, graceful stop right in front of the main door. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the chauffeur stepped out, wearing white gloves and a black cap. He walked around the car, opened the rear door carefully, as if opening a treasure box, and stood aside respectfully. From the car, Maria stepped out. The same woman they had mocked, laughed at, and expelled just 2 days before. She wore the same simple beige dress. No diamonds, no designer handbag, no heavy makeup. Yet there was something different about her. A quiet power in the way she carried herself. A calm dignity that filled the entire showroom. The staff froze. A few jaws dropped. Mark's smile faded instantly. Maria didn't glare, didn't scold, didn't even frown. She simply stood there, holding a small white envelope in her hand, the same one David had given her the day before. The dealership manager hurried forward, confused and nervous. "Gee, good morning, ma'am," he stammered. "How can we assist you today?" Maria smiled gently. "I'm here to deliver this," she said softly, handing him the envelope. The manager took it with shaking hands and opened it carefully. As his eyes moved across the words, the color drained from his face. "This Rolls Royce is a gift for Mrs. Maria Thompson. Delivered on behalf of her husband, Mr. David Thompson, owner of the Thompson Group." The manager looked up, speechless. The name David Thompson was one everyone in the city knew, a man whose company funded half the Skyline's construction, whose signature opened doors others could only knock on. And this woman, this simple lady they had insulted, was his wife. Mark's throat went dry. "And Mrs. Thompson," he stammered. "I didn't know." Maria turned her calm eyes toward him. "No, you didn't," she said softly. "And that's the problem, isn't it? You never asked. You just assumed?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was soft, almost kind, but every word cut through the silence like glass. Before anyone could respond, another car pulled into the driveway, a sleek, black Bentley. The door opened, and out stepped David Thompson himself, looking composed and confident in a gray suit. His presence immediately commanded attention. The staff quickly lined up, whispering nervously. David walked straight toward Maria, his eyes warm but protective. "Everything fine, my love?" he asked. Maria smiled. "Yes," she said gently. "They've received your message." The manager, trembling slightly, stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, sir. We had no idea." David raised his hand calmly. "You didn't need to know," he said firmly. "What you needed was respect. Something every customer deserves, whether they walk in wearing silk or cotton." The room fell silent. No one dared to speak. He continued, his tone even but powerful. "You sell luxury cars, but you've forgotten the meaning of luxury. It isn't about price tags or polished floors. True luxury is in behavior and how you treat people. A dealership that can't show respect can't sell dignity." Mark's face turned pale. He looked at Maria, guilt washing over him. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm truly sorry," he whispered. "I don't know what to say." Maria looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "There's nothing to say," she said. "Just remember, every person who walks in here has a story. You never know who they might be or what kindness they carry inside." David nodded in agreement. "And one more thing," he added. "The Rolls Royce stays here. It's a gift for the dealership staff to remind you that respect should never depend on wealth." The manager's eyes widened in shock. "You're donating it?" David smiled slightly. "Consider it a lesson paid in full." Maria turned to leave, but before she stepped out, she looked back one last time. "I forgive you," she said softly, "but I hope you learn." Then she walked out gracefully, her simple beige dress fluttering slightly in the breeze as she and David got back into their Bentley and drove away. Inside, no one spoke for a long time. The music continued playing softly in the background, but the staff could barely hear it. They were too lost in their thoughts, ashamed, stunned, and deeply moved. Mark whispered to himself, she didn't just teach us about class. She showed us what it truly looks like. And from that day forward, the dealership changed its rules. Every customer, rich or poor, dressed in silk or in simplicity, was treated with equal warmth. Because now, they knew the next ordinary person who walked through their doors might just carry a story extraordinary enough to change their lives forever. Asterisk. The moment Maria and David's Bentley disappeared from sight, a strange silence filled Royal Elite Motors. It wasn't the usual calm silence that came before customers arrived. It was heavy, sharp, and full of regret. The manager stood still near the main entrance, still holding the letter from David Thompson in his trembling hands. Around him, the staff shifted uneasily. The golden light from the ceiling reflected off the cars, but it no longer made the showroom shine. The place that once felt proud now felt cold. Mark, the salesman who had mocked Maria the most, lowered his head. His voice broke the silence. I can't believe it, he whispered. That woman. She was so kind. And I treated her like she was nothing. The receptionist swallowed hard. We all did, she murmured. She didn't even get angry. She just smiled. The manager exhaled deeply and rubbed his forehead. Do you all realize what just happened? He said in a low voice. We didn't just insult a customer. We insulted a woman of grace, the wife of one of the most respected men in the country. And we did it because of our own arrogance. No one replied. Everyone stared at the floor, the truth settling like a weight on their hearts. The showroom had always been a place of glamour and pride, full of shiny cars, expensive suits, and fake smiles. But in that moment, it felt small. For the first time, the employees saw themselves clearly, not as professionals selling dreams, but as people who had forgotten what respect meant. Mark turned toward the Rolls Royce that now stood in the middle of the floor. The car that had arrived that morning, gleaming and perfect, a silent witness to their shame. She left this car for us, he said softly. Why would she do that? The manager looked at him. Because she wanted to teach us something we couldn't learn from money, he said quietly. Class isn't about wealth, it's about kindness. Mark nodded slowly. His throat tightened. When she came here the first time, he said, his voice trembling, I laughed at her purse. I joked with Tom that she looked lost. I even told her she was wasting our time. And still, she forgave me. The receptionist wiped her eyes. She could have shouted. She could have ruined us with one phone call. But she didn't. The room was thick with silence again. Even the music had stopped playing. Outside, people walked past the glass doors, unaware of the storm of guilt brewing inside. After a long pause, the manager spoke again. This ends today, he said firmly. No more judging customers by their clothes. No more mocking anyone who looks simple. From now on, every person who walks through that door will be treated with dignity, whether they come in a Rolls Royce or a bicycle. The team nodded, their faces serious. For once, Mark wasn't thinking about commissions or deals. He was thinking about that moment when Maria had stood in front of him with tearful eyes, but still said, You should never judge people by how they look. Those words echoed in his mind, like a truth he should have known all along. Later that afternoon, the staff gathered around the Rolls Royce to look at it more closely. The car seemed almost alive, a symbol of grace and forgiveness. On the dashboard, there was a small envelope that none of them had noticed before. The manager opened it carefully. Inside, a simple note was written in Maria's elegant handwriting. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's strength wrapped in gentleness. Treat every soul with respect. That's the real luxury. The manager read it aloud, and for the first time, someone cried. It was the receptionist. She covered her face with her hands and whispered, She's better than all of us. Mark looked out the window, his eyes glassy. "I wish I could tell her I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You still can," the manager replied. "Maybe not with words, but with actions." From that day onward, Royal Elite Motors changed. The glass doors that once felt cold now opened with warmth. Every visitor, whether rich or poor, was greeted with the same respect. The staff began offering free coffee and a smile to everyone who walked in. Mark even started keeping a small note by his desk that said, "Treat everyone like they belong." A few weeks later, a young man entered the showroom wearing dusty clothes and torn shoes. The old Mark would have ignored him. But now, Mark smiled kindly and said, "Welcome, sir. How can I help you today?" The man hesitated, clearly nervous. "I'm just looking," he said. "No problem," Mark replied with genuine warmth. "Take your time. If you need anything, I'll be right here." The man wandered around quietly for a while, then left. The next morning, that same man returned, this time in a suit, and revealed he was the assistant to a wealthy client looking to buy 3 cars. He said, "My boss told me to visit the place where I was treated with kindness when I didn't look rich." Mark smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt proud, not because of a sale, but because he had done something right. That evening, when the showroom lights dimmed and the doors closed, the staff gathered once more around the Rolls Royce. It was still there, polished and shining, a reminder of the day they learned that kindness costs nothing but changes everything. The manager looked at his team and said softly, "We will never forget her, the woman who came here in simplicity and left behind greatness." Mark nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "A simple woman," he said, "but a rare soul." And from that day forward, whenever a customer entered the showroom, the staff would see the reflection of that Rolls Royce in the glass, and remember the woman who turned their arrogance into humility and their pride into compassion. Weeks passed after that unforgettable day at Royal Elite Motors. But the memory of Maria's visit never faded. Her kindness lingered like the scent of rain after a storm quiet. Gentle but impossible to ignore. The once proud dealership had transformed. The staff who used to measure people by their clothes now greeted everyone with warmth. The atmosphere was lighter, softer, as if Maria's presence had left behind invisible sunlight every morning. Before the first customer arrived, Mark would pause by the Rolls Royce that still stood in the center of the showroom. He'd touch the cool metal gently, almost like a prayer. On its side mirror, a small golden card hung, engraved with the words David Thompson had said that day, "Respect is free. You don't have to sell it." Those words became the heart of the dealership's new philosophy. And every time Mark looked at them, he remembered the moment that had changed him forever, the sight of a simple woman standing with dignity while he mocked her, without knowing who she truly was. He wasn't the same man anymore. His arrogance had melted into humility. He had realized that pride could blind a person faster than darkness ever could. One rainy afternoon, as Mark was arranging paperwork, the receptionist approached him. "You won't believe who's here," she said with a soft smile. Mark looked up. "Who?" The receptionist pointed toward the glass door. Outside, holding a small umbrella and smiling like the morning sun, was Maria Thompson. Mark froze for a second, his breath catching in his throat. Then he hurried to the door, his heart pounding with both guilt and gratitude. "Mrs. Thompson," he said softly as he opened the door. I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Maria smiled, her eyes kind as ever. "I was in the neighborhood," she said gently. "Thought I'd stop by to see how you're all doing. Please." "Come in," Mark said quickly, stepping aside. The moment she entered, the entire staff turned toward her not out of curiosity, but respect. The air felt different, like everyone was standing in the presence of someone truly noble. Maria walked slowly around the showroom, noticing the small changes. The welcoming board near the door read, "At Royal Elite Motors, every customer is special." She smiled approvingly. "It looks like you've made some beautiful changes," she said. The manager stepped forward, nervous but sincere. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "we can never erase what happened, but we've learned from it. Your words changed us more than any punishment could have." Maria nodded gently. "That makes me very happy," she said. "Sometimes we fall not because we're weak, but because life wants us to rise stronger." Mark stepped forward, his voice trembling. "I owe you an apology, not as a salesman, but as a man. I was cruel to you, and I'll never forgive myself for that." Maria looked at him kindly. "You already have," she said softly. "When we forgive others, we free their hearts. But when we forgive ourselves, we free our own." Her words washed over the room like a blessing. After a moment, she took a small card from her purse and handed it to the manager. "David wanted you to have this," she said with a smile. The manager opened it. Inside was a handwritten message from David. "Mistakes don't define character. Change does. Keep the car as a reminder that dignity has no price." The manager's eyes filled with tears. "Please thank Mr. Thompson for us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Maria smiled. "He thanks you too for listening." As she turned to leave, Mark called out softly, "Mrs. Thompson." She looked back, her eyes calm and bright. He swallowed. "That day. When you walked out of this showroom, I thought you left defeated. But now I realize you walked out stronger than all of us combined." Maria's smile widened. "True strength," she said, "isn't in loud words or wealth. It's in walking away with grace when others choose cruelty." And with that, she stepped outside into the rain. Her umbrella opened, and the droplets sparkled like diamonds around her. For a long moment, the staff just watched her walk away, a simple woman whose humility had taught them more than all their years in business. The manager turned to Mark, his voice quiet. "You know," he said, "I think she's the richest person I've ever met." Mark nodded slowly, watching her figure disappear down the street. "She is," he whispered. "Not because of her husband's money, but because of her heart." That evening, when the dealership closed, the staff gathered once more near the Rolls Royce. The rain tapped softly against the glass windows, and the lights reflected off the car's gleaming surface. The manager placed a small sign on the floor beside it. It read,